nothing out of the ordinary. Ever so gradually, the woodland resumed its natural rhythm, as if the gigantic hand that had been smothering everything had been lifted, so the creatures could breathe again. Birds sang. Squirrels scampered about on lofty branches. Chipmunks did the same over boulders and logs. Nate let himself relax. The danger had passed. He could go on about his business. Bending to the right, he fixed his piercing green eyes on the ground while nudging the stallion onward with a jab of both heels. Tracks were few and far between, but there were enough for the seasoned mountaineer to keep from losing the trail. Complete prints showed 5 toes, although the smallest barely left an impression. Claws were also evident. Less experienced trappers might have mistaken the tracks for those of a wolf, but Nate knew better. Wolves only had 4 toes, and their pads were shaped differently. The prints he followed had been made by a creature much more fierce, a creature shunned by Indians and whites alike. Nate King was after an animal which, pound for pound, was rated the most powerful of any of its size. Its reputation for savagery was unrivaled, even by grizzlies. It would eat anything it could catch and kill, as well as carrion. Early French trappers had a name for the animal, carcajou, which was still used by some mountaineers. A few of Nate's acquaintances had taken to referring to the voracious brutes as gluttons, based on the habit the creatures had of gorging themselves to the point of stupor. The majority, however, simply used the name the creatures were known by east of the Mississippi, wolverines. For several weeks now, a particularly vicious specimen had been plaguing Nate's family with repeated visits. At first, it had only shown an interest in the many ducks and geese that routinely flocked to a small lake near the remote King homestead. His young son, Zach, had found the first clues in the form of 3 ducks that had been literally ripped to shreds, and a couple of clear tracks in the blood-soaked mud at the water's edge. Nate had not been overly alarmed by the report. Wolverines, by and large, tended to fight shy of human beings. He'd assumed the beast would tire of lying in wait for waterfowl and wander elsewhere. But as the days turned to weeks, and the weeks became a month, he'd grown increasingly concerned. The wolverine had started to rove closer to the King cabin. Nate had stumbled on tracks close to the trail his wife and infant daughter took daily down to the water's edge. The animal, quite obviously, had been spying on them. He began to worry that perhaps it had designs on tiny Evelyn, as wolverines were known to be fond of fawns and other young animals. Then the beast had developed the habit of circling the cabin late at night. Its pungent scent always spooked their horses, and the animals would prance and snort and whinny until Nate appeared to soothe them. On a half-dozen occasions he'd heard the wolverine off in the thick brush, growling and snarling as if in frustration that it could not get at the stock because of the small corral in which he kept them penned. The final straw had been an incident the previous night. Nate had been snuggled against the warm form of his lovely Shoshone wife, Winona, in the pine bed he had fashioned with his own 2 hands. Close by, stretched out on a buffalo robe in front of the stone fireplace, slept their son. Little Evelyn had been snug in her small cradle. The cabin had been cozy and warm and tranquil. Suddenly a tremendous uproar had erupted outside. The horses had been nickering and stomping in abject fright. Nate had grabbed his hawken and dashed into the darkness in his bare feet. He'd rushed to the south side of the cabin, just in time to see a long, hairy form trying to force its muscular bulk between 2 of the rails to get at a terrified colt his wife's mare had given birth 2 months ago.